Being hospitalized is such a hassle. Give birth before I come home. Don't trouble me any further," Tom said as he upturned the wine bottle he had, pouring its contents over my head. The aroma of the wine's grapes, the alcohol, now unbearable in its harshness. This wine was something my father brought, saving it for when I'd get better. Since getting pregnant, it's been nothing but unpleasant experiences. Tom showed no kindness to me, struggling with morning sickness. Instead, he would just harshly say I wasn't trying hard enough. Yet, I endured desperately. To have such an outcome waiting, it's just too much. In a rage, Tom threw the empty wine bottle at me. Bracing for the impending pain, I tightly closed my eyes. But the wine bottle thrown by Tom hit. My name is Allie Kirk, a 34-year-old housewife. I live with my husband Tom. We were colleagues at the company where we worked. Acknowledging each other as rivals, continually striving for excellence. In time, we developed feelings that went beyond just work. Things moved quickly from there. I was able to share my feelings with Tom, and he felt the same. Our somewhat awkward dating period was incredibly happy. Every day felt fresh and so blissful, it made me wonder if it was all too good to be true. After a year of dating Tom, at a fancy restaurant he'd booked stretching our budget, he proposed, asking me to marry him. There was no reason to refuse. By then, I had already dreamed of building a home with Tom. Our wedding was a small affair with close family and friends. As I'm not one for large gatherings, which he considered thoughtfully. But marriage isn't all about being celebrated by many. That day, filled with warm wishes from loved ones, was unforgettable for me. The happiness continued unabated. 2 years into our marriage, feeling unwell, I went to the hospital with Tom. We discovered a new life growing inside me. The ultrasound revealed we're having a girl, our precious little one. Now, it's not just the two of us, it's going to be the three of us. The realization slowly sunk in, and it was overwhelming. Right after we found out about the pregnancy, we called our parents. They were thrilled, saying, "Finally, a grandchild." They suggested I come home during the pregnancy since it might be tough, but Tom couldn't join because of his work. The idea of leaving Tom alone and staying at my parents' felt awkward, so we decided to tough it out on our own. "If you run into trouble, just tell us," my parents said repeatedly. I know we'll probably turn to them when things get really tough. But until then, Tom and I want to try brining out the best of us. After all, we're this child's parents. We doubled down on our efforts even more. To become worthy parents of our adorable child growing inside me. To make sure when this child is born, they feel it was good to be born. We tackled everything we possibly could. Sometimes pushing ourselves too hard. But each time we managed to accomplish something, feeling we were getting closer to being good parents, there was an indescribable emotion. However, I was the only one who felt that way. From the day we found out I was pregnant, Tom gradually became colder towards me. "You've been out drinking till this time again? Can't you act a bit more responsibly? You're going to be a father, don't you have any sense of responsibility?" Tom didn't come home until late at night. I know from working at the same company that his company advocates no overtime, and indeed, even during busy periods, he has never come home late at night before. Moreover, I could tell from being close that he reeked of alcohol. Tom has always enjoyed his drinks in moderation, but lately, it's as if he's been going overboard, coming home drunk every day. If he was late because of work, that would be one thing. But in Tom's case, it was clear he was just out having fun. Of course, I'm not saying he shouldn't have time to unwind. Enjoying a drink in moderation is probably necessary, especially considering how hard Tom works every day. However, since finding out about the pregnancy, Tom has been out drinking every day for a month. Returning home severely intoxicated, making it my job to look after him. Despite being heavily pregnant and exhausted, Tom doesn't approve of me sleeping before he comes home, so even if he returns late into the night, I'm not allowed to sleep and have to stay up taking care of him. Despite being pregnant, I have absolutely no time to rest for our child. Since getting pregnant, things have become even more challenging, and instead of looking forward to a bright future, I've been feeling down. Tom's terrible behavior only adds fuel to the fire. Hey, what are you lounging around for? There was dust in my room. Clean it up again. It was Tom's day off, and unusually, he was at home instead of being out. Lately, he's been away from home even on his days off, so it was rare for him to be around. But his presence didn't make me feel any more at ease. I suffer from severe morning sickness, and there are days I can't move at all. Unfortunately, this day was one of my worst days with intense morning sickness, unable to move much or do any housework, just lying on the couch. My stomach was churning, I couldn't eat properly, nothing provided relief, and my head was spinning in agony when Tom's yelling echoed throughout the house. I'm sorry, but I'm really feeling unwell right now. I'll clean up later if I can, just please be patient. My head was aching and I felt dizzy. Pushing myself to get up and apologize, Tom seemed to be in a bad mood and wasn't backing down. It's your own fault for not managing yourself properly. You're bringing this upon yourself. Don't cause trouble for others with such excuses. Clean up now. Hurry. Saying so, Tom grabbed my arm. Feeling unwell, I nearly blacked out but somehow managed to follow him. Eventually, I cleaned Tom's room while feeling terrible. Cleaning in my condition was truly difficult. I fought back nausea many times but managed to hold it in. And yet, the hard times continued. He was never kind to me because I was pregnant. In fact, he treated me more harshly and badly than he had treated me before I became pregnant. The fatigue and stress took their toll on me first. Trying to avoid Tom's scolding and doing the bare minimum housework, I was suddenly struck by an excruciating stomach pain. I couldn't stand and collapsed. Even so, my maternal instincts were strong, and I somehow managed to call 911 on my smartphone unconsciously. I lost consciousness soon after, but thankfully, the call went through. I was rushed to the hospital, and the doctors decided I needed to be admitted. There was something wrong with my body, and if things continued this way, the baby would be born prematurely, much earlier than expected. All I could do was cry over my own helplessness. Upon hearing the news, my parents came to the hospital room. "Allie, it's not your fault," they encouraged me, but all I could feel was guilt towards my child. "We bought this thinking we'd drink it once you're discharged. You like wine, don't you?" My dad said, placing a bottle of wine on the bedside table. Just one look at it, and I could tell it was from a good vineyard. He must have bought it hoping it would cheer me up after hearing I had collapsed. Soon after, Tom arrived in the room. Barely exchanging greetings with my parents, he frowned upon seeing me. "You're always causing trouble for others, aren't you? Think about me, who had to leave work early because of you," Tom said in his usual cold tone. But then, he said something unbelievable. "I hadn't mentioned it, but I've got a trip planned soon. Chances are, it'll coincide with the birth. Try to handle it on your own." I felt dizzy hearing Tom's words. My child's father wouldn't be there for the birth because of a selfish trip? Please reconsider. You can always reschedule the trip, right? The moment of a child's birth is precious, don't you understand that as a father? I couldn't help but lash out in anger. I just couldn't forgive him. Tom had always been irresponsible as a father. But this was beyond unacceptable. However, my words seemed to fall on deaf ears as Tom sighed heavily, grabbed the wine bottle from the table, uncorked it, and turned it over my head. "Hospital stays are such a hassle. Give birth before I get back. Stop bothering me." He snapped at me. Frozen by the shock, I couldn't move. Seeing my reaction, Tom muttered, ignoring me, and, unbelievably, he threw the empty wine bottle at me. Bracing myself for the impending pain, I tightly closed my eyes. But no matter how long I waited, the anticipated pain never came. When I hesitantly opened my eyes, I was met with a surprising scene. Father-in-law. The wine bottle was shattered on the floor not far from the room's entrance. And there lay my father-in-law, unconscious. I was completely dumbfounded, wondering what was happening, when presumably my mother-in-law, who must have come with my father-in-law, called for help. Doctors and nurses rushed over. "Are you okay?" Despite the doctor's calls, my father-in-law didn't respond. Security brought in a stretcher, and my father-in-law was carried away. The whole series of events was so shocking that everyone was left speechless and frozen. In the midst of it all, only my mother-in-law remained composed, handling the situation. She told us to wait while she contacted the police, leaving my parents, me, my mother-in-law, and Tom in the room. A heavy silence filled the air. Amidst this, my mother-in-law, who seemed somewhat angry, began to explain the situation bit by bit. Originally, my parents and my in-laws had been in frequent communication since our marriage. Upon hearing from my parents that I had collapsed, my in-laws, who live far away, made time in their busy schedules to visit me. However, when they arrived at my hospital room, they heard arguing voices inside. Hesitant about whether to enter, they decided to wait at the door. That's when they heard Tom saying terrible things to me, and saw him about to throw a wine bottle at me, which left my mother-in-law paralyzed with shock. On the other hand, my father-in-law must have made a split-second decision. I ran as fast as I could into the hospital room to stop the bottle of wine that was headed for me. As a result, the bottle struck him as he suddenly got between Tom and me, leading to the tragic scene. "I'm so sorry. It's all my fault." I felt terrible that my father-in-law suffered because of me. What if something happened to him? A wine bottle is a dangerous weapon. The thought of a worst-case scenario left me speechless. Seeing me distressed, my mother-in-law smiled and assured me, "It's not your fault, Allie." Then she turned to Tom with a sharp gaze. "We saw everything. We saw you pour wine on Allie and throw the bottle at her. We heard the awful things you were saying to her. What were you thinking? To think you've become this kind of person when we weren't looking. Apologize to Allie right now." The anger in her voice was palpable. Now that my father-in-law was seriously injured, her anger made perfect sense. Even if the bottle hadn't hit my father-in-law, it would surely have hit me. Throwing a weapon at someone is not normal thinking. "Shut up. Don't blame me. If you're going to blame anyone, blame Allie for not maintaining a proper married life since she got pregnant. I've been patient ever since Allie got pregnant. But all she does is blame me every day. It's Allie's fault for stressing me out." What Tom did is absolutely unforgivable. Yet, he's trying to escape his guilt and shift all the blame onto me. His words make it feel like everything we've built up is crumbling down. Before I knew it, any love I had for Tom was gone. Blaming others is the lowest of the low. You're clearly in the wrong for throwing a wine bottle, Tom. Throwing a weapon at someone is insane. Maybe you're the one who needs to be seen by a doctor? At my words, Tom reacted with a furious "What?" That makes sense. I've never really condemned Tom's actions, no matter how unreasonable they were, just mildly scolding him at most. Frustrated, Tom grabbed me by the collar while I sat on the bed. "Say that again. Calling someone a freak. Is that how you treat your husband?" Tom yelled at me with such intensity that it seemed he might strike at any moment. My father stepped in to restrain Tom. Overpowered by my father's strength, Tom quickly let go of my collar, and my parents and mother-in-law intentionally created a distance between Tom and me. Yet, the resentful glare from Tom was painfully clear and hard to bear. "You still dare to act like this? Let me tell you, no one here is on your side. I, and certainly Dad, think you are in the wrong. When your father wakes up, you better be prepared," my mother-in-law said, applying pressure with her words. My dear father-in-law, who stood up for me. My only deep regret is that I gave such a hard time to my father-in-law. Even though the wine bottle was meant for me, the fact that it knocked my father-in-law unconscious is undeniable. Tom keeps diverting his gaze from this reality, persistently blaming me, insisting Allie is at fault. No matter how much my mother-in-law argues you are to blame, it doesn't change. even when my parents give him cold stares, he remains unaltered. Everyone present is exasperated by Tom's refusal to accept his wrongdoing. What can be said or done for Tom to truly reflect and amend his ways? No answer comes to mind. But we can't just let this go. As we all were pondering, the hospital room door burst open with a loud noise. Turning to see what was happening, there stood my father-in-law, his head wrapped in bandages. Nurses and a doctor were following him, but when my father-in-law said, "I'm fine now," they remained calm and left the room.
Father-in-law, are you okay? I'm so sorry, it's all my fault.
Tears started to flow the moment I saw him. He was standing on his own, but his head was so heavily bandaged it was painful just to look at. If only he hadn't shielded me at that moment. Overwhelmed by guilt, I started to sob, but my father-in-law came closer to the bed and smiled. "It's not your fault, Allie. But I overheard some intolerable words while I was awake." My father-in-law spoke kindly to me. But his expression quickly turned to anger. As his gaze fixed on Tom.
Dad, I'm glad you're not severely hurt. I'm really sorry about what happened, my hand slipped. I never intended to hit you with a bottle, believe me.
Tom desperately clung to my father-in-law. My father-in-law is usually very calm, more inclined to understand the root cause of issues rather than blame or get angry. However, there was no trace of his usual gentleness in his look at Tom. The tension in the room signaled my father-in-law's anger. My mother-in-law, my parents, and I all remained silent, watching the situation unfold. "You said you didn't intend to hit me. Then who are you aiming at?" "It looked like it was going to hit Allie if it hadn't hit me," my father-in-law asked Tom. It was a calm but forceful voice. Despite the authority in his words, Tom, misunderstanding that he was being defended, tried to ingratiate himself with, "Exactly. I wasn't trying to hit Dad. I wanted to make Allie reflect by hitting her. Dad, you might not know, but I've been continuously stressed out by Allie. Every day she's just angry. You always said getting angry doesn't solve anything, it just makes the atmosphere worse. I agree with that. So, being scolded by Allie every day was a torment for me. You hate getting angry, Dad, so you must understand how I feel, right?" I felt disgusted by Tom's words. Complaining about being scolded and stressed out? If Tom had acted responsibly as an adult and a father, none of this terrible situation would have happened. It's all Tom's fault. His appalling attitude naturally twisted my expression in disgust, my hatred for him growing boundlessly. Perhaps sensing my feelings, my father-in-law shouted at Tom, "Enough is enough. Dad." Tom was taken aback by the sudden outburst. Even my usually calm father-in-law had every right to be angry this time. It was fortunate that there were no life-threatening injuries, but it could have easily gone the other way.
"I would have considered forgiving you if you showed genuine remorse. Everyone makes mistakes. That's why if you had shown even the slightest regret, vowed never to repeat such an act, and sincerely apologized to Allie, I would have done everything in my power to help you find forgiveness. But you betrayed even that sentiment. Not content with just hurting Allie, you disregarded my feelings as well. There is no mercy left for you."
My father-in-law's voice filled the room, tinged with a despairing, lonely tone. His words constricted my heart. I'm sure my mother-in-law and parents felt the same. In the midst of it all, there was just one person who failed to read the air.
"Dad, please don't say that. We're family, aren't we? I'm your flesh and blood son. Without your help, my life is over. Don't abandon me, help me. Without you, I'm nothing. Are you okay with seeing your son's life fall apart?"
Tom was desperately clinging to my father-in-law, but no one in the room was willing to lend him a hand. Instead, everyone looked at him with contempt. Serves him right, it was his own doing. Thus, Tom, the person that I had long been pondering, had to suffer the wrath of heaven. He was taken by the police for questioning, and ended up being charged with assault, resulting in a hefty fine. He begged for help, but to be honest, I had neither the obligation nor the inclination to assist him. My affection for him had completely drained, so after giving birth to our daughter, I presented him with divorce papers. Tom was desperate not to divorce, but after what had happened, there was no way I could continue our marriage. His resistance was so strong that I had to hire a lawyer and go through divorce mediation. Naturally, the wine incident was used as evidence, and it was determined that Tom was at fault, leading to the divorce being finalized. On top of that, I was able to claim alimony and child support, so I made sure to get what I was entitled to, demanding a substantial amount in alimony and child support. In a situation where Tom could hardly afford to pay the fines, he was also hit with claims for alimony and child support. He seemed desperate, but his in-laws offered no help, instead firmly stating, "You are not welcome in our home," and turned him away when he sought their assistance. Now, Tom is living a lonely life, hounded by debts. As for me, the substantial alimony and child support have provided a foundation to focus on raising my daughter. Unable to manage alone, I returned to my parents' home, where they've been supportive, expressing happiness that I'm relying on them. The time spent with Tom was filled with unbearable stress every single day. I was angry at myself for not seeking a solution sooner, but looking at my adorable daughter's sleeping face always calmed me down. Since then, my father-in-law underwent medical exams and, fortunately, was found to have no abnormalities, allowing him to return to his everyday life. My in-laws often express a desire to see their granddaughter, and our interactions continue, with them showing her considerable affection. Finally, peaceful days have arrived. I'm determined to keep pushing forward to maintain this tranquility.